He confessed, "I can't resist you." The Apache's desire burned, the desert stretched endlessly under the golden sun, its heat shimmering off the sand and waves. Dakota walked slowly along a narrow path that cut through the rocky hills near his village. The weight of the day pressed down on him, but it wasn't just the sun that made his chest feel tight. His thoughts kept returning to Amaya. She was always there in his mind like a fire that would not go out. He had known her since they were children, running barefoot through the dusty trails, laughing at nothing and everything. But as they grew older, those childhood games had been replaced by a quiet, unspoken tension, a tension that burned inside him, refusing to be ignored. Dakota's life as a young Apache warrior was filled with responsibilities. He trained daily, learning the ways of his people, practicing with the bow and spear, and listening to the stories of their ancestors around the evening fires. His father often reminded him that discipline and honor were everything, and that a warrior's heart must be controlled, no matter what temptations it faced. Dakota had always tried to follow this advice, but Amaya made it almost impossible. She was clever and independent, moving through life with a confidence that fascinated him. She had a quiet strength, the kind that made people listen when she spoke, and Dakota found himself hanging on every word. Every encounter with her felt electric, even the smallest gestures. A brush of her hand when passing a basket, the soft sound of her laughter carried across the village square, the way her dark eyes would meet his for just a moment, left him breathless. Sometimes he would catch himself staring when he thought she wasn't looking, and his heart would race, a mixture of fear and longing swirling inside him. Dakota knew he had to remain careful. The Apache had rules and traditions for everything, and showing such feelings openly was frowned upon. Desire had to be controlled, and yet, no matter how hard he tried, it grew stronger every day. The village was preparing for a gathering that night, a time when all the families came together to celebrate the harvest. Dakota and Amaya were assigned to work together, helping to arrange the decorations and prepare the meals. As he approached the place where she was already busy, his stomach tightened with anticipation. Amaya looked up and smiled at him, and for a moment, the heat of the day, the noise of the village, and even the stories of their elders faded away. All he could see was her, moving gracefully as she lifted a basket of colorful fruits. "Dakota," she called softly, "could you help me with this?" He nodded, trying to keep his voice steady. Of course. They worked side by side, arranging baskets and sweeping the area. Their hands brushed occasionally, and each time Dakota felt a spark that made him blush. Amaya seemed oblivious, humming a gentle tune as she worked, but he noticed the small things, the way her hair caught the sunlight, the gentle curve of her smile, the quick glance she stole in his direction when she thought he wasn't looking. He wondered if she felt the same pull, the same quiet desire that made him ache inside. As the afternoon passed, Dakota's mind wandered back to the moments they had shared over the years. He remembered the time they had explored the hills beyond the village, finding hidden caves and climbing the tallest rocks to see the land stretch endlessly below them. He remembered the stories they had whispered to each other late at night, sitting near the fire, their faces glowing in its warmth. Back then it had been innocent fun, a friendship born of curiosity and shared adventure. But now, those memories had taken on a different meaning, filling his heart with a longing that was impossible to ignore. Amaya, too, seemed different these days. She carried herself with more confidence, and there was a softness in her eyes that made Dakota's chest ache. He could sense that she felt something too, though she never spoke it aloud. It was in the way she lingered near him, in the way her laughter seemed directed just at him, in the way she would glance up at him when he thought she was busy. There were moments when their hands would accidentally touch, and they would both freeze for a heartbeat, aware of the electricity that passed between them. Dakota shook his head as if to clear it. He tried to remind himself of the rules, of the lessons his father had taught him. He could not act recklessly. He could not let his desire control him. A warrior's heart must be disciplined. Yet every rule, every lesson seemed to fade the moment Amaya was near. He could not resist thinking about her, imagining her smiling at him in the quiet of the night, imagining the warmth of her hand in his. It was a dangerous game, but one he could not stop playing in his mind. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, the village started to fill with people. Children ran around laughing, elders shared stories, and the air was alive with music and song. Dakota and Amaya continued their preparations, their movements more relaxed now, but their eyes still seeking each other across the bustling crowd. Dakota felt a strange mixture of excitement and fear. He longed to speak to her, to say what he had kept hidden for so long, but the words would not come. Instead, he found himself watching, waiting for the right moment that might never come. During a brief pause, Dakota and Amaya found themselves sitting together on a low stone wall, catching their breath. The wind blew gently across the desert, carrying with it the scent of sage and earth. For a moment there was silence between them, a silence that was comfortable yet heavy with unspoken words. Dakota wanted to reach out, to tell her everything, but he did not. Instead, he looked at her quietly, memorizing the curve of her face, the brightness of her eyes, the way her lips moved as she hummed softly. Amaya seemed to sense his thoughts. She turned slightly, her eyes meeting his with a curious intensity. "You're quiet today," she said, a small smile playing on her lips. "I am thinking," Dakota replied, his voice low and steady though his heart raced, "about the gathering and the work we still have to do." Amaya laughed lightly, a sound that made Dakota's chest tighten. "You always think too much," she said, teasing him gently. But there was warmth in her tone, a hint of understanding that made him feel both comforted and restless at the same time. As the sky darkened and the first stars appeared, Dakota felt the weight of his feelings more than ever. He knew that something inside him was shifting, that his desire for Amaya was growing stronger with each passing day. The thought both thrilled and frightened him. He had never felt so alive and so powerless at the same time. The fire inside him burned quietly, waiting for a spark to ignite it fully. When it was time to resume their duties, Dakota stood, brushing the dust from his clothes. He glanced at Amaya once more before joining the others, and she returned the look with a small, knowing smile. The unspoken connection between them was undeniable now, and Dakota realized that nothing could be the same again. Their friendship, their shared moments, and their secret longing had changed into something more profound, something that neither could easily control. As the sun finally disappeared behind the hills, leaving the village bathed in the soft glow of twilight, Dakota walked with a sense of anticipation he had never known. The night promised possibilities, mysteries, and emotions that could no longer be ignored. He knew that soon the quiet tension between him and Amaya would demand a response, one way or another, and deep inside he felt a mixture of fear and hope, knowing that this was only the beginning of a journey neither of them could have imagined. For now, though, he focused on the simple joy of being near her, of sharing the same space, and of feeling the invisible bond that had always existed between them. Dakota could not resist her, not yet, not ever, and he understood that his heart would not let him. The desert around them seemed endless, but in that moment the distance between them felt small, as if the world had shrunk to just the two of them, bound by memories, glances, and the unspoken desire that simmered quietly, waiting to erupt. Days passed in the village, each one blending into the next under the scorching sun and endless sky. Dakota found himself thinking about Amaya more than ever. Even when he was training with other warriors or helping elders with daily tasks, his mind would wander to her. It was not just her beauty that captivated him. It was her spirit, her courage, and the way she seemed to carry herself as if the world itself could not shake her. He admired her, respected her, and most of all, desired to be close to her in ways he could not yet express. Amaya, too, seemed caught in her own quiet struggle. She had always been independent and confident, but there were moments when her eyes lingered on Dakota a little longer than necessary, when her smile was softer, warmer, and tinged with something unspoken. She noticed the way he would glance at her from across the village square, the way his hands would pause mid-task whenever she walked nearby. And though she tried to focus on her own duties, she could not ignore the growing pull between them. Every time their hands brushed by accident, she felt a flutter in her chest, a mixture of excitement and fear. The village prepared for another event, a small ceremony to honor the elders and celebrate the coming of the spring rains. Dakota and Amaya were again assigned to work together. As they carried baskets of food and water from one end of the village to the other, they exchanged glances filled with meaning. Neither spoke of the feelings that simmered just beneath the surface, yet both were painfully aware of them. At one point they paused near a small grove of trees at the edge of the village carrying heavy baskets. Dakota set his down first, offering a hand to Amaya. Their fingers touched, and for a moment neither moved. The contact sent a shiver through both of them. Amaya looked into Dakota's eyes, searching for a hint of what he might be thinking. Dakota, feeling the heat of the moment, looked away quickly, forcing himself to focus on the work. "Careful with that," he said, his voice steady though his heart raced. Amaya smiled, the soft, knowing smile that made his chest ache. "I can handle it," she replied, lifting the basket with ease. But she felt the same electricity in the air, the same unspoken tension that made it hard to concentrate on anything else. As the day went on, they moved through the village, arranging decorations, preparing food, and helping the elders. Each task brought them closer, yet every step was careful, measured. The unspoken rules of their people were always in the back of their minds. Showing affection too openly could bring gossip, and breaking those rules was not something either wanted. Still, their connection was undeniable. Every look, every shared laugh, every accidental touch deepened the bond between them, making it impossible to ignore. During a brief moment of rest, Dakota and Amaya sat together near a small stream at the edge of the village. The water sparkled in the sunlight, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of wildflowers and earth. For a while, neither spoke. Dakota watched the ripples in the water, trying to calm the storm of emotions inside him. Amaya, sensing his inner turmoil, reached over and touched his hand lightly. "Dakota," she said softly, "you seem distracted today." He looked at her, the words caught in his throat. I am, he admitted, his voice low. "There is much to think about." Amaya tilted her head, curious and concerned. "Is it about the ceremony or something else?" Dakota hesitated. How could he explain that his mind was consumed by her, that his heart longed to be near her, to speak words he had kept hidden for so long? Instead, he shook his head and smiled faintly. "It is nothing, just the usual thoughts of a warrior." Amaya studied him for a moment, sensing the truth beneath his words. She smiled, not teasing this time, but gently, as if understanding without needing to speak. "We all have our burdens," she said, "but sometimes it helps to share them, even if only a little." Dakota wanted to take her words to heart, wanted to confess everything, but the fear of breaking tradition held him back. Instead, he nodded, silently vowing to protect his feelings until the right moment came. The tension between them, though unspoken, grew heavier, and the small gestures, the way they reached for baskets at the same time, the way their eyes met briefly before looking away, spoke louder than any words could. As the afternoon sun climbed higher, the village became busier. Children ran about, playing games and laughing, their voices echoing through the streets. Elders gave instructions, and the younger men and women worked to ensure everything was ready for the ceremony. Dakota and Amaya continued their tasks, but each was acutely aware of the other's presence. It was as if the world had narrowed to just the two of them, even in the midst of the bustling village. That evening, as the sky began to turn shades of pink and purple, the ceremony started. Villagers gathered in a large open space, forming circles around the elders who began to share their stories and blessings. Dakota and Amaya stood side by side, participating in the rituals and listening carefully to every word. Their hands brushed occasionally, and each time a spark ran through both of them. Neither could deny the pull that was growing stronger, a pull that demanded attention and threatened to break the careful boundaries they had set. After the ceremony, people began to move away, talking and laughing as they returned to their homes. Dakota and Amaya stayed behind for a moment, helping to tidy the area. The night air was cool, a welcome relief from the heat of the day, and the stars twinkled above them like tiny fires scattered across the sky. For a while they worked in silence, each lost in thought, each aware of the unspoken tension between them. Finally, Dakota spoke, his voice low and hesitant. "Amaya, do you ever feel something that you cannot explain?" Amaya paused, looking at him with curiosity and something deeper, an understanding perhaps of exactly what he meant. "Sometimes," she admitted softly. "It is like a fire inside that cannot be ignored, no matter how hard you try." Dakota's heart raced. He wanted to ask more, to tell her everything, but the words stayed in his throat. Instead, he nodded, understanding that she felt the same pull that had been consuming him. For the first time, there was a quiet recognition between them, a shared understanding that their feelings were real, powerful and growing stronger by the day. As they finished their work and prepared to return to the village, Dakota and Amaya walked side by side, the night wrapping around them like a protective blanket. The desert was calm, the only sounds the rustle of the wind through the trees and the distant calls of nocturnal animals. Their steps were slow, deliberate, as if neither wanted the moment to end. When they reached the edge of the village, Dakota stopped, glancing at Amaya. She looked back at him, her eyes reflecting the soft light of the stars. Neither spoke at first, but the connection between them was undeniable. Dakota's heart was pounding, and he knew that soon their feelings would demand more than stolen glances and quiet understanding. Something inside him was ready to ignite, to take the leap he had long avoided. Amaya smiled faintly, sensing the change in him. "We will have to be careful," she said softly. There are rules, and we must respect them. Dakota nodded, his hand brushing against hers for a fleeting moment. I know, he said, his voice barely above a whisper, but it is hard to ignore what is in our hearts. She looked down, a gentle blush coloring her cheeks, and for a moment they simply stood there, sharing the quiet night and the knowledge of what they both felt. The tension between them had grown into something undeniable, and each knew that their lives were about to change in ways they could not yet foresee. As they finally parted and returned to their respective homes, both Dakota and Amaya carried a new awareness of their connection. It was no longer a simple attraction or friendship, it was something more, a bond that demanded attention and honesty. And though neither could yet act on it openly, the spark between them burned brighter than ever, waiting for the right moment to catch fire. Dakota lay awake that night, staring at the dark ceiling of his home, thinking of Amaya. Her laugh, her smile, her eyes, they haunted him in the most beautiful way. He knew he could not ignore these feelings forever. Something inside him had shifted, a quiet but undeniable truth that would not be silenced. And as the desert wind whispered through the village, carrying with it the sense of sage and earth, Dakota realized that his heart was no longer entirely his own. It belonged in part to Amaya, and he could not resist the pull of what was to come. The days that followed the ceremony were filled with quiet tension. Dakota found it harder and harder to concentrate on his duties, and every glance at Amaya seemed to pull him deeper into a current he could not resist. The desert sun bore down as he trained with the other warriors, yet his mind kept wandering to her smile, the sound of her laughter, the way her eyes seemed to look right into his soul. Every detail, every memory, felt sharper, more vivid, and impossible to ignore. Amaya too felt the change. She moved through the village with her usual grace, carrying out her chores, speaking with elders, and helping the children with their lessons. Yet, beneath her calm exterior, her heart raced at the thought of Dakota. She remembered the way his hand had brushed against hers near the stream, the quiet understanding in his eyes, and the warmth of his presence when they worked side by side. It was a feeling she could neither name nor escape, a pull that was growing stronger with every passing day. One afternoon, the village elders asked Dakota and Amaya to accompany them to a nearby ridge, where the younger warriors and women were learning about the land, its animals, and its plants. The ridge overlooked the desert stretching endlessly into the horizon, and the elders wanted to teach the younger generation about their heritage and the ways of their ancestors. Dakota and Amaya walked together along the narrow trail, carrying supplies and listening carefully to the elders' instructions. As they reached the ridge, the wind blew softly, ruffling their hair and carrying with it the scent of sage and dry earth. Dakota found himself walking slightly ahead, yet he kept glancing back to make sure Amaya was following. She caught his gaze and smiled, a simple, quiet smile that made his chest tighten. They worked alongside each other, carrying stones, setting up markers, and helping the younger villagers understand the lessons. Every so often their hands would brush, sending shivers through both of them. Neither spoke of it, yet both were acutely aware of the connection that had grown between them. During a break, Dakota and Amaya sat on a large rock, catching their breath and watching the younger children explore the ridge. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the desert below. For a moment the noise of the village, the chatter of the children, and even the instructions of the elders seemed to fade away. Dakota turned to Amaya, wanting to say something, to finally speak the words he had kept inside for so long. But his courage faltered. Amaya noticed the hesitation, the tension in his posture, and she felt it herself. She wanted to ask him what he was thinking, to reach out and bridge the invisible distance between them, but she held back. Instead, she simply looked at him, her eyes reflecting the fading sunlight, and waited. Finally, Dakota spoke, his voice low and unsteady. Amaya, there is something I must tell you. She tilted her head, curious and cautious. What is it? She asked softly, her heart beginning to race. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. I cannot hide my feelings anymore. Every time I see you, every time we work together, I feel something I cannot control. I cannot resist you. Amaya's eyes widened, and for a moment the world seemed to stop. Her heart pounded in her chest, and she felt a mix of shock, relief, and an undeniable joy. She had sensed his feelings growing, had felt her own stirring in response, but hearing the words out loud made them real. She did not speak immediately, unsure of how to respond, but the look in her eyes said more than words ever could. Dakota continued, his voice trembling slightly. I have tried to follow the rules, to control my heart, but it is impossible. I cannot ignore what I feel for you. You are everything to me. Maya finally found her voice, soft but steady. Dakota, I feel the same. I have tried to ignore it, tried to focus on my duties, but my heart, it belongs to you as well. The confession hung in the air between them, a delicate yet powerful bridge connecting their hearts. Neither moved at first, both afraid to break the fragile moment, yet both aware that their lives were about to change. The sun dipped lower, painting the desert sky in shades of orange and purple, and the wind seemed to carry their emotions along with it, wrapping around them like a warm blanket. They stayed there for a long time, sitting side by side on the rock, talking in whispers, sharing memories, and revealing the hidden corners of their hearts. Dakota spoke of his fears, of the struggle to remain disciplined while his desire for Amaya grew stronger every day. Amaya shared her own struggles, the way she had tried to remain composed, the way she had felt drawn to him even when she knew it was risky. Each revelation brought them closer, binding them in a way that neither could deny. As darkness fell over the ridge, the stars appeared one by one, twinkling like tiny lanterns in the sky. Dakota and Amaya stood together, looking out over the desert, feeling the vastness of the world and the intensity of their own connection. For the first time, the pull between them was no longer silent. It had been named, acknowledged, and accepted. And with that acknowledgement came a mixture of fear and exhilaration, for both knew that acting on their feelings would not be easy. The walk back to the village was quiet, each lost in their own thoughts, yet their hands brushed several times, and each time it was as if a spark traveled through them, leaving them both breathless. When they reached the edge of the village, Dakota finally took her hand in his, a simple gesture that felt like a promise. Amaya squeezed his hand gently, her heart swelling with emotion. Neither spoke, yet the meaning was clear. They were connected, and nothing could erase what they had just shared. Over the next few days, life in the village continued, but Dakota and Amaya's relationship had shifted. Every glance, every touch, every word carried more weight. They found themselves seeking moments alone, however brief, to share thoughts, smiles, and quiet companionship. Even in the midst of work, training, and duties, their minds wandered to each other, and every encounter left them both longing for more. Yet the weight of tradition and responsibility was never far from their minds. They knew that their feelings, though powerful and genuine, had to be balanced with respect for their people and their customs. Every moment together was measured, careful, and deliberate, but even that carefulness could not dim the fire that burned within them. The tension grew, a constant reminder that their hearts were no longer entirely their own. One evening, after the day's work was done, Dakota and Amaya found themselves alone once more near the stream. The water glimmered under the silver light of the moon, and the air was cool and fragrant with desert flowers. They sat together in silence for a while, each aware of the other's presence, each feeling the unspoken desire that had grown stronger since their confession. Dakota spoke first, his voice barely audible over the gentle rustle of the wind. Amaya, I have never felt like this before. It is as if my heart has been waiting for you all my life. Amaya's eyes softened, filled with warmth and understanding. I know, she said softly. I feel the same. It is like we were always meant to find each other, even if it took years to understand it. The night stretched on, filled with quiet conversation, laughter, and shared memories. They spoke of their childhood, of adventures and dreams, of hopes for the future. Every word, every glance strengthened the bond between them, making it clear that their connection was deeper than mere attraction. It was a meeting of souls. As they finally rose to return to the village, both Dakota and Amaya felt a mixture of contentment and anticipation. Their hearts were no longer hidden, their feelings no longer silent. The next steps, whatever they might be, would be taken together, with courage, respect, and the unbreakable bond that had formed between them. Dakota walked with a sense of purpose he had never known. For the first time he felt free to acknowledge his heart without fear, and Amaya, walking beside him, felt the same exhilaration. Together they were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that their hearts were aligned and their connection could not be denied. The desert night stretched endlessly around them, vast and silent. Yet within that silence, their hearts spoke loudly. They had crossed the threshold from longing to confession, and though the path ahead was uncertain, one thing was clear. Their bond was real, undeniable, and strong enough to withstand anything. The night after their confession, the desert felt different to Dakota. Every sound seemed sharper, every shadow deeper, every breeze carrying the memory of Amaya's words. He had spoken his heart, and she had returned his feeling. Yet the reality of their emotions was almost overwhelming. For days he had carried desire quietly, locked behind discipline and caution. Now, that desire burned freely, unrestrained and undeniable. The fire inside him was no longer something to hide. It demanded attention, and he knew it demanded hers as well. Amaya, too, felt the change. She moved through the village the next day with a sense of lightness she had not known before. Even the simplest tasks seemed brighter when Dakota was near. She noticed the way his eyes sought hers, the way his presence lingered near her even when he was helping with other work. There was a new intimacy in their glances, a shared understanding that had not existed before. Both of them felt the thrill and tension of knowing they were no longer alone in their feelings. That evening, the elders announced a special gathering at the river, a time for the villagers to come together and share stories, songs, and dances under the stars. Dakota and Amaya were assigned to help set up the event, carrying supplies, arranging food, and guiding others to their tasks. Yet every movement, every step they took together was charged with an unspoken excitement. The moment was ordinary, but the awareness of each other transformed it into something extraordinary. As they worked, Dakota found himself standing closer to Amaya than usual. Every time their hands brushed while arranging baskets or tying decorations, a spark shot through him, making him forget the heat, the dust, even the people around them. Amaya noticed the same effect, feeling a warmth spreading through her chest whenever he came near. Their connection had shifted from quiet longing to an electric anticipation that neither could ignore. When the last preparations were complete, the villagers began to gather around the riverbank. Children ran and laughed, elders shared stories, and the young adults danced to the rhythm of drums echoing across the water. Dakota and Amaya stepped back for a moment, observing the joyous scene, and for a heartbeat they were lost in each other's eyes. "Shall we take a walk?" Dakota asked quietly, his voice steady but soft. Amaya nodded, a small shy smile playing on her lips. "Yes," she replied. They walked together along the river, the moonlight reflecting off the water, creating a path of silver that seemed to stretch endlessly before them. The sound of the river mingled with the distant drum beats, a soothing rhythm that mirrored the rapid pace of their hearts. Dakota reached for her hand, and this time Amaya did not hesitate. Their fingers intertwined naturally as if they had always belonged together. The air around them seemed to hold its breath. Dakota's heart thudded in his chest, and he realized that every second with her was more precious than anything else in the world. He stopped by a large flat rock near the water's edge and turned to face her. Amaya's eyes reflected the moonlight, shining with a mixture of curiosity, anticipation, and trust. "I have waited so long for this moment," Dakota said softly, his voice low but firm. "Be with you, to be honest about my heart, to feel what we both feel." Amaya's gaze softened. "I have waited too," she whispered. "I never thought it could feel like this, like everything else fades away and there's only us." Dakota took a step closer, their hands still linked. The warmth of her presence, the softness of her eyes, the gentle rise and fall of her breathing, it all combined to make him feel alive in a way he had never known. The world around them seemed to disappear, leaving only the desert night, the river, and the two of them. For a while they simply stood together, sharing the quiet, their hearts speaking in ways words could not capture. Every glance, every touch, every shared smile deepened their connection, making it clear that their feelings were no longer just a secret. They were a bond, unbreakable and profound. Dakota felt the weight of his previous restraint melting away, replaced by a courage that came from knowing that Amaya felt the same. He reached up gently, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Amaya leaned into the touch, a soft sigh escaping her lips. "I trust you," she said quietly, and in those words, Dakota felt the full depth of their connection. It was more than desire. It was love, respect, and understanding. The unspoken promise between them was stronger than any fear or doubt. As the night grew deeper, the stars twinkled above like countless witnesses to their emotions. Dakota and Amaya walked further along the riverbank, finding a quiet spot where the water rippled gently over smooth stones. They sat side by side, shoulders brushing, hearts beating in unison. The intimacy of the moment was almost overwhelming, yet neither felt afraid. Instead, they felt safe, as if the universe itself had conspired to bring them together. "I want to know everything about you," Dakota said softly, his voice barely audible over the river. "Your thoughts, your dreams, your fears, everything." Amaya smiled, her hand still in his. "And I want to know you the same way," she replied. "I want to understand your heart, your mind, all the pieces that make you who you are." They spoke for hours, sharing their deepest thoughts, their hopes, and even their insecurities. Every word, every story, every laugh and sigh created a tapestry of understanding and trust. Dakota discovered the gentle courage behind Amaya's confident exterior, the kindness that guided her every action, and the quiet strength that made her unforgettable. Amaya learned of Dakota's loyalty, his dedication, and the passion that had been growing quietly inside him for so long. As dawn approached, the first hints of light painting the sky in soft pinks and purples, Dakota and Amaya leaned against each other, exhausted but content. The world had returned, slowly, with the sounds of the village waking and the river sparkling in the morning sun. Yet within them, something profound had changed. Their bond had moved from unspoken longing to a shared reality, a connection that was both tender and unbreakable. Dakota whispered, "No matter what comes next, I will always be by your side." Amaya pressed her head to his shoulder, her heart full. "And I will always be with you." The desert around them seemed to hold its breath, as if honoring the moment. The river flowed gently, the wind rustled the trees, and the first birds of the morning began to sing. Yet for Dakota and Amaya, the world had narrowed to a single truth. They belonged together, and nothing could erase the bond that had finally been revealed. They stood, holding hands, and began the walk back to the village. The morning sun cast long shadows across the sand, yet neither felt afraid. They had crossed a threshold, moved past hesitation, and embraced the depth of their feelings. The fire that had burned quietly in both their hearts was now a steady flame, warming them, guiding them, and promising a future that neither could have imagined before. As the village came into view, Dakota squeezed Amaya's hand gently, a silent affirmation of the night they had shared and the bond they had formed. Amaya returned the gesture, her eyes sparkling with the knowledge that their connection was now unbreakable. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, their hearts aligned and their spirits intertwined. And in that moment, the desert around them seemed alive with possibility. The river sparkled like liquid silver, the wind whispered softly through the trees, and the sun rose over the horizon, promising new beginnings. For Dakota and Amaya, the night had changed everything. The bond of their hearts had been revealed, their desires acknowledged, and their connection strengthened. The world was vast and uncertain, yet within each other they had found something eternal, unshakable, and beautiful.